Hello Internet, welcome back to From to Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, talk into the cosmic abyss about books, movies, music that I enjoy, find interesting, or a combination of the two. And today I'm going to be talking about Cixin Liu, the Chinese writer, and his trilogy of books that are usually known as the Three-Body Trilogy. The trilogy start with the Three-Body Problem, goes on to Dark Forest, and the last book, which is the one I'll be talking about most, is Death's End, which I've just finished reading. I'll be trying to avoid spoilers as much as possible in this video so that people who've not read the books also can enjoy the video, but there will be some spoilers for the first novel, Three Body Problem, because without talking about the main concept of that book, I can't really talk about the trilogy. I'd also like to mention that although there is a Netflix series based on these books, I have not seen it, I don't intend to see it, and I won't be discussing the series here. Alright, so the narrative of Three Body Problem begins with a character called Ye Wenye, who is kind of the sort of origin of the entire narrative of the three novels. She is a very lonely, isolated scientist who works on a kind of research center in an isolated place in China. She saw her father killed by the Red Guard during the Cultural Revolution. She feels very alienated from people in general. Following a series of quite negative interpersonal, political, and career related experiences, she sends a message into space, and she does this by realizing that she can use the sun to amplify broadcasts into outer space. So she sends a message out into the universe asking aliens to come and take over. She says something along the lines of humanity has failed in its task and it needs to be rescued or replaced by alien intelligence. She gets a message back almost immediately telling her to cease transmission. She gets a message from an alien saying, I live on a planet which you do not want to know about your existence. I must ask you never to broadcast again. If you are careful, perhaps your broadcast will go unnoticed. But she broadcasts a second time. So this is the fundamental concept at the core of the Three Body Trilogy. What happens if you come into contact with an alien culture who you would prefer did not know of your existence? And throughout this first novel, there is also a kind of strange computer game, an immersive computer game called the Three Body Problem, which has some connection to this planet which humans have come into contact with, which is called Tree Solaris. And the main characters of the book, become aware of an organization on Earth called the Earth Tree Solaris Organization, who are an organization of humans who want the aliens to come and take over the planet. Some of them think that the aliens are some kind of idealized god type figures who are going to control and take over the world in a better way. And some of them believe that humans will be eradicated when the aliens arrive, and they think that that's what humans deserve. Now, already in this is the start of what I think is really interesting about the Three Body Problem, which is that the author, Cixin Liu, he wants to explore what the kind of meta-political ramifications of this kind of contact would be. What different ideologies, political attitudes, and events would be likely to occur if we came into contact with a technologically advanced alien species. So that's essentially the first novel, Three Body Problem. It's much more complex than that, but I don't want to give away too much about the story. The second novel, Dark Forest, has a slightly different concept at its core, which is a kind of continuation of the first book. And the question is, what happens if an alien intelligence, an alien species, is a threat to the planet Earth, and the only advantage we know we have over them is that they do not understand the concept of lies and subterfuge, because they can not communicate with one another something that's different from what they are thinking. So humanity's key advantage is that humanity can misdirect, lie, be dishonest. So this book in the main, although it looks like a kind of intergalactic sci-fi novel, largely it's a book about a project that is set up internationally called the Wallfacer Project, where a few people are selected to be given significant, almost unlimited resources to use to defend the planet, but they don't have to explain what they're doing, and they should attempt to make their actions as misleading as possible. And it follows particularly one person called Luo Ji, who is like the main wall facer of the novel, whose behavior seems to be genuinely confusing and nobody seems to know what it is he's trying to achieve. But he also seems to be the one that the interplanetary invading force are most concerned about. This book, I think, is really brilliant. One of the best sci-fi novels that I've read, and it does have some sections as well about kind of space and intergalactic travel, but it's more about the kind of developments taking place on Earth. This novel also introduces cryogenics as a very important plot point, which is something that continues in the third book, and it starts to move over much larger periods of time. So you see the culture of Earth develop and change over a span of hundreds of years. Then we come to Death's End, the third novel and the final novel in the trilogy. As you can see, it's very long. It's over 700 pages long. I don't normally read books that are this long, I have to be honest. I feel that there are so many books in the world that I get stressed out reading a book that takes me more than like maximum 10 days to read. But I have been on vacation recently, so I chose to try to get through this book. And honestly, it was not difficult to stick with the narrative, even though it's so vast and so sprawling in some ways. Now, after a short introductory story from the distant past, Death's End begins with something like a novella of around 100 pages, which is about a character called Yun Tiaming, and he is terminally ill, and at the same time he comes into a lot of money. And he chooses to use this money to buy a star for a woman who he loved when he was a student some years earlier, 6, 7 maybe years earlier. This woman is called Cixin, and she is a scientist who is working on a defense plan parallel to the Wallfacer plan to try to send a probe up to the area of space where the alien civilization who are going to invade the Earth are. And this story, which is kind of about the two of them and about his illness and about her research and about them meeting again, it's beautiful, it's tragic, it's horrifying, and it's probably one of the best science fiction novellas or short stories I've read. I mean, it's like, it reminds me of Ray Bradbury in a way, but it's more, the character work is deeper. It's conceptually fascinating. It's emotionally harrowing, and it also introduces some of the characters that we will follow through the rest of the novel, including the female character Chen Xing, who receives the star. She's kind of the central character of the rest of this novel. I will say that the core question in this book, if there is one, is what happens if the world cannot be defended? If planet Earth cannot be defended? What would the ramifications of this be? How would it affect people psychologically, politically? And Cixin Liu, he in Dark Forest, he introduces this metaphor of an ant, which becomes much clearer in this novel as a kind of view of humanity from a distance, like from an alien perspective, as just like a mass of these small creatures. There are parts of this book that are quite horrifying to read in the context of genocides taking place in the world today. And he throws out some like really, he takes up some really difficult questions around like morality and ideology, idealism, versus pragmatism, at what point sacrifice or violence is and is not justified. And these questions and this narrative have a scope that goes over thousands of years and ultimately has a perspective of geological time and or the time of the universe. It begins to draw in different dimensions, different parts of the cosmos, several discrete eras in human history, in the future, different cultures, cultural developments. It's so incredibly rich and complex, complicated, but at the same time, I never felt like it became kind of like he ever lost control of it. It was always, although it's really sprawling, it's always like conceptually makes sense. It's really, honestly, just completely brilliant. Another thing that I think is really fascinating about the whole trilogy, but especially Death's End, is how he sets up characters who will do a thing at one point in the story that is kind of heroic or seen to be good or seen to be a savior of humankind at one point, and how subsequently a new generation will view that person in a completely different light. And I think that that's something that we see again and again, that our cultural ideological beliefs shift over time, so that people who at one time we looked up to only a generation later can be considered to be villains. Although at times you feel like Liu has a almost like totalitarian attitude towards politics or pragmatism, because he's setting up such extreme situations, ultimately this book has like a very beautiful core about human connection and human relationships. It's also a book that talks about death, that talks about endings, that talks about how everything is temporary and how everything is constantly shifting, how nothing ultimately is permanent, and how we need to find a way to live in the knowledge of this. So I feel like this writer has done so much, because he creates a universe that for the first novel is kind of soft sci-fi, takes place almost within human political spheres, and slowly develops in scope, both in terms of space, time, dimensions, range, the number of characters, the number of story strands, and he lets it all kind of grow like a web that ultimately hangs together perfectly. He also explores like human relationships, politics, philosophy, and he looks at issues of colonialism, repression, individual freedom, love, loneliness, compromise, and mortality. Have you read these books? What did you think about them if you have read them? I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your opinion. Don't be worried about spoilers in the comments. I feel like people can watch the video if they haven't read the books. But if you go in and read the comments, be prepared that maybe we'll be talking about the novels in more detail. Thanks for listening to me. Hope to see you again soon.